Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Waltz, which is episode 11 of season 6 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as requested by my viewers. This episode was requested by the Real Fan 21. Waltz was the episode in which Captain Sisko was on another Federation starship that was escorting Gul Dukat to a hearing when the ship is attacked and destroyed by the Cardassians. Dukat manages to get Sisko to a shuttlecraft and escape. Sisko wakes up injured and alone on a planet with Gul Dukat, who claims the shuttle no longer works, thus stranding them on the planet, and he's sending a general distress call to whoever will respond to it first. While waiting on the planet, Gul Dukat continually tries to engage Sisko in conversation, seeking his approval. Sisko becomes wary of Dukat's delicate state of mind as it becomes apparent he's hearing voices and talking to people who aren't there. However, Sisko discovers that Dukat isn't sending a distress signal at all, and Sisko repairs the device so it does send out a distress signal. When Dukat discovers this, he beats Sisko in a fit of rage. Sisko then has had enough of Dukat and tells him exactly what he thinks of him, which drives Dukat into an insane fit of rage, which Sisko takes advantage of by knocking him out and making for the shuttlecraft. However, Dukat gets to the shuttle first and throws him out and declares that he will make it his mission in life to kill all the Bajorans and make them pay. And then he leaves in the shuttlecraft. However, he tells the Defiant where to find Sisko, who then rescue him, but Dukat gets away. This episode reminds me a lot of the first season episode Duet, where Major Kira spars with a supposed Cardassian internment camp leader responsible for committing atrocities against the Bajoran people. It has that same sort of feel, with two people sitting alone talking and having a battle of wits. The titles are even similar, one referring to singing and the other referring to dancing, but both referring to two people engaged together in a performance. So I did think this episode was an attempt to recapture the magic of that engaging conversational episode, and in my humble little opinion, they failed to do so. Although that is quite a high bar in my opinion, considering I think Duet is the best episode in all of Star Trek, because it accomplishes something really hard to accomplish, so I don't really hold it against this episode for not quite getting there, and it is still a really interesting episode to watch. To continue with the Duet comparison, it is interesting comparing Dukat to Maritza, as Eamon Maritza was a soldier following orders, and when Kira first heard that, she instantly tossed it aside as a lame excuse, and that in her eyes all Cardassians involved in the occupation were guilty, but later she learned that Maritza really did regret the occupation and was emotionally scarred by it, and thus learns that he was in fact a good man. Whereas in this episode, Dukat also tries to make out as he was just a soldier following orders. However, Sisko doesn't buy that for a second, and when he digs deeper, he finds Dukat didn't really feel guilty at all for the atrocities he committed, and in fact, he still holds a lot of anger against the Bajorans. It was an interesting contrast. However, personally, I find it much more powerful when someone you think is evil is actually good, as opposed to here where someone you think is evil is actually even more evil than you think. This was a nice character study of Gul Dukat, who is, in my opinion, the best villain in all of Star Trek and one of the best villains in all of television. It's interesting follow-up to the end of the station takeover storyline at the start of the season, where Dukat went insane after seeing his daughter killed, and this shows what he's like in his new weakened mental state. Although the fact he sees people who aren't there and talks to him is a bit of a TV trope and not all that accurate from a psychiatric point of view, however, it still works really well in this episode to see Dukat in this weakened state where he desperately seeks Sisko's approval. He doesn't want to be forgiven for all the harm he's done. He wants to be told he's done nothing wrong, which of course is not the case. It was really fun to see him lose his mind, and it did raise the stakes that Sisko was stuck trying to deal with someone who was completely unstable. As I said, I love Dukat as a villain, but I don't necessarily think he's well suited for a straight battle of wits in a purely dialogue-driven situation. However, it was interesting to further explore his megalomania as he continually referred to Sisko as his old friend and put up this front like he was only trying to help the Bajorans. At first, Sisko placated him because he could tell that he was unstable. However, after he beat him, Sisko has had enough and was ready to tell him exactly what he thought of him, damn the consequences. But the more he pushed him, the more Dukat's facade of just being a benevolent dictator who wanted to help the Bajorans slowly began to crumble. The voices of his delusions, Damar, Weyoun, and Kira were also very interesting insights into his state of mind. However, Sisko eventually gets to the heart of it when Dukat says this.
From the moment we arrived on Bajor, it was clear that we were the superior race. They wanted to be treated as equals when it was clear they certainly were not.
This, of course, is continuing the analogy of the Cardassians as Nazis that reoccurs throughout Deep Space Nine. However, this could apply to any bigoted or racist group of people who see themselves as the superior race, and therefore it's their God-given right to treat them however they deem necessary. It was a nice glimpse into the mind of a mass murderer, and it was once and for all exposes him for the evil villain he truly is. I kind of didn't like how in Season 4 and 5 they started to make Dukat an ally, and his interest allied more with the Federation's. This episode was great because he made it completely clear that this man was no ally. This episode, we also get a little side plot with the Defiant searching for Sisko, which was of course meant to add a ticking clock to the situation, as they have to find Sisko in a certain amount of time, otherwise they'll have to leave him for dead, which does a pretty effective job in raising the stakes. However, typically I find episodes where someone is stranded on a planet where the ship looks for them a bit cliched, and a plot Star Trek does all too often. However, on the planet is a totally different situation because you get this battle of wits with Sisko and Dukat, but the side plot with the Defiant looking for them is pretty much the same, and therefore I didn't really find it that interesting, except for this one scene I found interesting, because it defied normal Star Trek tropes where they would hear an order they didn't like and ignore it and be like, oh, sorry, didn't catch that, too much interference. However, this episode subverts that trope by having Bashir try to do that, but Worf being like, no, you heard it just fine. That was a really nice spin to that trope that really helped define Worf's character. The one thing that kind of confuses me, though, is the command structure between Worf and Kira. I think that's because it kept changing ever since Worf was first introduced. As in earlier seasons, Worf was established as the first officer in Starfleet matters, and Kira was only the first officer as far as the station goes. However, in this episode, we see Kira talking to Starfleet Command directly and giving Worf direct orders. I know a lot of people complained about this because it makes no sense for a Bajoran officer to be in command in Starfleet matters, but ultimately I'm glad they made this change, even if it doesn't make much sense, because Kira was established as the show's first officer, so I'd like to see her be the first officer in all situations, as in this case she is clearly Worf's superior. However, I did find the ending of this episode a bit over the top. I think the main purpose of this episode was to put Dukat back into play, because he was the show's best villain after all, so he couldn't just remain a prisoner for the rest of the series. But the end where he did this, I thought that was a tad too much, and indeed I wasn't a huge fan of that, what they did with this character next by turning him into a religious fanatic. But whatever, it was okay, I guess. However, the thing I really didn't care for was this speech here.
Sometimes life can seem so complicated. Nothing is truly good or truly evil. Everything seems to be a shade of gray. And then you spend some time with a man like Dukat, and you realize there is such a thing as truly evil.
Personally, I feel that's a rather simplistic view and not exactly what I got out of it. To say he is pure evil is oversimplifying matters. He's an insane, egotistical, selfish megalomaniac responsible for killing millions and capable of more atrocities to serve his own selfish purposes, and I think to call him evil diminishes how dangerous this man is and how guilty he is. But that's just me. I mean, I typically like films and shows like Game of Thrones that try to present characters as more dynamic than simply good or evil, but even Game of Thrones has characters like Joffrey that have no redeeming qualities whatsoever and are capable of unspeakable crimes to serve their own ego, and Dukat is one such character. And typically Star Trek had that same dynamic feel, so I didn't appreciate this speech, which in my opinion tried to diminish that. I just feel that in the final 2 seasons, there was this push to give a more epic Lord of the Rings type feel, and I don't think it quite worked. So my rating for Waltz is a 7, very good. This was an interesting episode that explored one of the best villains in all of television. However, I don't think this was Dukat's best episode, and although this episode was very engaging, I would describe it as nothing great. So that's it for my review of Waltz. If there's an episode from any of the 5 Star Trek series you'd like me to review, just leave a comment below with the episode you'd like me to review and I'll endeavor to do so. But please, 1 episode request per person, and be sure to check out my channel for many other Star Trek videos, and be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.